here over at Crafty Christie's Creations, and today I'm going to do my first attempt with the Cricut Infusible inks. So I've got the, this is the Galaxy Infusible inks, and I've got a 100% polyester shirt. Typically you don't want to do infusible inks on color, but I figured this is light enough and this is kind of a purpley, kind of dark colored one that maybe this pink color won't shine through so much. I've got my mini ironing board here to press on. I've got my lint roller. I've got a ruler here to help me space things out properly. And I've got some cardstock to protect my shirt and also my my ironing board here from any ink seeping through. And then I've got parchment paper to put on the top. And then of course I've got my handy dandy heat press here. So we're gonna jump over into Silhouette Studio and get started with the design. All right, here we are in Silhouette Studio, and I've got my Dreamer design here. This is mostly meant to be a kind of an echo design, multicolored layered design. But I'm going to use just this top one here, this light blue, and we're going to do just that. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to right click and ungroup. So what this says here is the top design, the words are layered on top of each other, and this one they're cut out. Because I'm using the top layered color, it doesn't matter which one I use. But I'm just going to go ahead and pull out this one is the one that I want. And everything else can get taken off the screen. And I've already measured my shirt, and I want this about 9 inches. So I'm going to make sure my ratio aspect is on lock, and I'm going to change that width to 9. And it'll automatically change the height to be correct. So that's all I need to do to set it up. I'm going to go ahead and mirror my design now. Using infusible ink is just like what you would do with heat transfer vinyl. You need to mirror your designs. So I'm going to come over to the replicate panel, and then I'm going to mirror. It doesn't matter if you mirror left or right. So now I can take the original off the screen and I can bring in my mirrored design. I'm going to try to get it up here in the corner the best I can to save as much of this as I can. And now we can come over to the sun panel. I'm going to pick the correct cut setting. And since this is my first time, I don't know if there's an infusible ink setting on here. Doesn't look like it. So I'm going to start with my flocked heat transfer setting. That's what I've learned works best for most heat transfers that I've used. So we'll start there and do a test cut and move on. So I'll see you at the machine. Do you find this helpful? Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any future Silhouette Studio tutorials. Now let's jump back in where we left off. All right, I've got my ratchet blade in here. Again, I'm starting with the flocked heat transfer vinyl setting, and that's just a place to start. I went ahead and cut out my piece here and laid it on here, knowing I can do a test cut over on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and add this into the machine, and then we'll go ahead and do a test cut. So I'm going to load the mat. And then I like to use these small little arrows down here. And then once you open it up there, you can kind of really move these over. And then I'm going to try to come down pretty good here, knowing it's going to go a little bit further down. And I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to go back to the computer and hit test. So I'm just going to do a test cut of those current settings to make sure that that's actually going to cut through. And that should pull that out just far enough. So you can see my pieces right here. That should have pulled it out just far enough. Now let me see how hard this is to peel up. Now I know that you're supposed to crack this before you peel to see if that's going to help. So I'm going to try to just lift this off a little bit. See if I can't crack that a little bit. And I did, it seemed like it cracked. Yeah, and that seems to be coming up just fine. So I think that is going to be just, yeah, that's going to be a great setting for my machine. Everybody's machine's a little bit different, so you have to see what works for you. But I'm going to leave that setting on there, and I'm going to go ahead and cut out the design. So I'm just going to hit send, and it's giving me the reminder, send as is or send mirrored. We've already mirrored the design, so I'm just going to send as is. So like I was just saying, you have to kind of crack this before you peel it, otherwise you risk tearing it. It's more, acts like a paper than really a vinyl. Feels kind of like a paper texture. So once we're done, before we start weeding, we'll just do like how I just did. You'll kind of peel that, we'll peel it off of the mat, and then we'll just kind of move it around and get the different edges to crack a little bit to make it easier to weed so that we don't end up damaging our design. All right, it's all done. I'm gonna go ahead and hit unload. Because I know it worked well, you know, we did our test, it worked well. I'm just gonna go ahead and peel this off the mat. We can set that mat aside. And then what I was saying with the cracking, you just want to see how it makes that lovely cracking sound. That's actually really satisfying. And really just getting it to crack around my edges. Now here's the point that I can decide to cut my design, and I can either let the pink shine through with the word Dreamer and then have this on the outline, or I can use the word Dreamer in this lovely color, and that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm going to weed out around my word Dreamer. So we'll go ahead and go to the table and do that. I've made a little room. I'm in my workspace here, and we're gonna go ahead and weed out this design. Because I've cracked it, it makes it a lot easier. I can just go ahead and peel up this little edge. And I'm still gonna be careful not to rip any of this, so I'm just gonna peel nice and carefully. But this weed's pretty easy now that I've kind of cracked, and you can still hear it cracking around as I'm peeling off. So I'm just kind of going around the top of my letters first. And I would say I feel that I have to be more careful with this than I would with regular vinyl or heat transfer vinyl when I'm weeding, because if I rip this design, there's no coming back from that. I'd have to recut it. And for me, this Infusible ink is kind of like when you find really pretty cardstock. It's like hard to want to use it because it's so pretty, you want to save it. And that's kind of how I felt about this. It's been sitting here in my craft room for, gosh, a couple of months now, and I'm just like, man, it's so pretty, I don't want to use it. But then, you know, you realize like, but that's what it's for, you have to use it. So I just thought that was kind of funny. All right, I've got that, all the outside done, and I'm just gonna peel out the insides. And I think I can just get away. I don't know that I really need my weeding tool to do this. You can just kind of bend this transfer a little bit and peel those insides out. It's not that hard. This is a little bit of tackiness, just like with your heat transfer vinyls. Has the transfer paper on there, so it is a little bit tacky. And then I'll peel that little piece off of there too. Okay, our transfer is all weeded and ready to go. I've got my heat press heating up over here, so that'll ding when it's ready. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up to get ready to press our design. Okay, my heat press is ready. I've got everything sort of set up. We're gonna do a piece of cardstock underneath, and then actually what I think I'm gonna do is take my shirt and I'm gonna put it over the edge here. So just like you would, you know, you could put your pressing pad, I would do between the layers, so it's a little bit better. And then you see I've got my cardstock inside here as well. And that is, again, to protect anything from going through the shirt, any of that ink getting through the shirt, and potentially you know, going onto my board or going to the back of the shirt. That's why I decided to put all of this kind of on the in-between. So I've got that done, and then I'm gonna go ahead and lint roll everything. Just like you would if you're doing heat transfer, you wanna do a little lint rolling to make sure there's no debris on your shirt. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is also give it a pre-press. And that's just gonna warm everything up. So I'm just gonna do a 15-second pre-press here. So we can go ahead and hit start. So I'm at 380 degrees. For what Cricut recommends, because I've got the heat press too, for the vinyl is to do 380 degrees and then 40 seconds. So that's what we're set for. So I went ahead and did my pre-press, and you can see it leaves a little bit. Next time my heat press cools down, I need to give it a good cleaning. I think I've got some residue on there, and my paper is a little warped underneath here, but that's okay. Problems for a different day. So knowing kind of the size of my shirt here, I'm gonna go from the center, and I'm only gonna go down about let's go maybe 2 inches. I think that'll be fine. I think that'll be far enough. Actually, let's go like the top pieces of our design can go at the 2-inch mark. I think that'll be great. So I'll do that. I'll pull this out of there. And then before I really lock that down, I'm gonna measure from the sides of my design to the end here. That's about 6 inches. And I'm measuring to about the end of the sleeve. Yeah, so that looks good and centered. I'm gonna go ahead and press this down. Again, this is my first time using this Infusible ink. I'm really excited to see how this works. And you know what? On this colored shirt, it might not turn out that great. And am I straight? I don't think I'm really straight. It's hard to look at this kind of upside down too. But I don't think I'm straight. So knowing that's where it needs to be, straighten this out a little bit. Okay. That looks a little more straight to me. Tell you what, I have had lots of issues lately with placement and doing these shirts, especially trying to do them upside down. So bear with me if this turns out kind of funny. All right, so I've got that on there. And then the cool thing, I don't have to use my parchment paper. It came with a sheet in the kit, so that's cool. So I can use that. This is like your butcher paper, which you know, is better recommended than your parchment paper, because the parchment paper has a bit of a film on it that can actually leave residue on your shirt. So that's even better that it came with a sheet on there. And then I can save this and reuse it as long as there's no ink on it. So again, I've got basically my ironing board, which would be like my pressing mat. Under that, I've got a couple sheets of cardstock just to keep my shirt protected and my ironing board protected. Then I've got my transfer down. We cut it with the design up. You place it design down, design is mirrored. and then your sheet of butcher paper that they include in the package. And then we're gonna bring on the heat press, and I wanna be sure that I'm setting it on my design and I'm not moving it once it's set down. And we're gonna have to go a little bit sideways. So where it's plugged in. Okay, so here's the spot, ready, and then you're doing light pressure, 380 degrees for 40 seconds. And I've just got one hand light pressure on here, and that's just to give it time. And then once it's done, you want it to become completely cool to the touch, completely cooled back down to room air before you peel that off. That gives it all the time to really sink into the shirt and go through all of its chemical processes. So we've got about 10 seconds left here. Again, we're just doing that soft pressure, 380 degrees for 40 seconds. And then I'm gonna try very carefully to lift straight up so that way I don't risk anything moving. So again, lifting straight up. I pressed my entire design in one foul swoop. So that was another thing. You wanna make sure you get the entire design pressed. This piece of paper looks completely fine, so that's cool. I can roll that back up and reuse that later. And now we wait for it to cool down. So I will be back once the design is cooled and we'll show you what it looks like. All right, our design is fully cooled down. It's back to room temperature. I'm gonna go ahead and peel it. Here's the great reveal. Well, that's really interesting. So you can see that it's different colors in different areas, and I think really what that has to do with is that my board is wobbly, and I think I just didn't get good pressure in the entire design. So, but where it did, it looks really cool. What I think I'm gonna do, and I'm just gonna try this and see what happens. I'm gonna put my design back on here. And I know especially the edges did not get good coverage. And you know, that's part of because it goes to the edge of where my heat press can touch. So I'm gonna put that back on there. Lined up the best that I can. I'm gonna turn my heat press back on, and I'm gonna go ahead and let that warm up, and I'm gonna hit those spots again and we'll see what happens. So what I'm gonna do, I put that back on, got it lined up the best that I could. Gonna let my heat press warm back up. And then actually I think I'm gonna try it just on this hard surface. So now that that's in place, it should stay. I'm gonna take this board out of here. I think that was the problem. It's wobbly, it's not, I don't have good even pressure everywhere. So I guess moral of that story is if you're thinking about why I need a pressing pad, perhaps you do. Because that did not press evenly. And then looking through, my cardstock is still the normal color, so that's cool. I'm gonna try to line this up a little bit better, and then we'll give it a go. And we'll see if this works. Maybe you can't really do this a second try. But I know that there is more ink to be found in those corners, so let's see what happens. I'll put this back on, and then also what I'm gonna do is just really focus on this half, and then I'll do the other half just like you would with your heat transfer vinyl, and we'll see what happens. So again, 380 degrees, 40 seconds. We'll see what happens. All right, it's completely cooled down for the second time, and we'll see how this looks. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel, and here is the great second reveal. Well, the colors definitely look a lot better. Here's that. Yeah, the colors look a lot better. I think in this instance, it was good that I did it a second time. I can still see there's some spots in here that are kind of faded, don't look as great. But, you know, so what I learned from this. One, you definitely have to make sure you have a flat surface. And what that means for me is my ironing board is not it anymore. It's very wobbly, so that did not work. Let's go ahead and pull out our cardstock here. And the other way I know that that board was uneven is my cardstock is all bent and, you know, warped, and that, you know, some of it is, yes, the heat will warp it a little bit, but it shouldn't. If it's on a flat surface, the heat shouldn't really warp it. So that's another way I know that I wasn't really on a flat surface. So you have to have a flat surface, but you did notice nothing bled through, so that's awesome. But I would definitely put that under there just in case, because you just never know. And so I think the flat surface, and then also knowing that I need to be a little more mindful to keep my design within the measurements of my heat press, because moving that around, I do risk some issues, but I don't know that I really see, you know, I can't see any distinct lines of where I was. So that's cool. And the second thing I learned is that if you have spots that didn't work that great, you can, if you line it up right, you can go ahead and hit that area again and finish transferring all the ink, and I don't see that that really hurt anything on my shirt. So that's pretty cool. So there you have it. There's my first attempt at using the Infusible inks, and I think I'll call it a win.